Boy, did Penn State get some much-needed good news yesterday.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Also now on YouTube, you can watch the show. This episode of Locked On Nittany Lions is sponsored by Sling TV. Don't miss this week's matchup between Penn State and Maryland right here on Sling. Sling, the TV you love for the price you'll love, and try it today. My name is Zach Seyko. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Nittany. Also, you can follow my personal account at Zach_Seyko. Penn State did get a lot of good news yesterday, and it was revealed at the James Franklin Weekly Press Conference. We're going to get into that first. Then in the following segment, the new college football playoff rankings have been released. Where does Penn State stand? And some of the other teams, the new top four is out. And did Penn State move up? Did they stay put? Or did the committee, for whatever reason, move them down after beating Indiana the way they did? We'll talk about that, plus some hypothetical bowl matchups based on that spot in the college football playoff rankings. And then we'll finish the show talking about Penn State men's basketball again. The college basketball signing day is today, National Signing Day for the class of 2023. The three verbal commits for Penn State that you need to know about, the guys that will most likely sign with this class under Micah Shrewsberry. But let's start up with that good news for Penn State football, and that is the fact that you had injury updates for particular players on the offensive line specifically, but you get a huge addition for next year's rotation, and that is guard, tackle, the guy they picked up in the transfer portal. Hunter Nourzad is coming back. He is going to return for another season next year in 2023. And this is a huge get for Penn State. It just adds more depth. It's a guy that you can rely on either at multiple spots or you can start him in one spot. But there's a lot to unpack just from this decision alone. But let's start with where Nourzad's coming from. Why did he want to come back to Penn State? Well, first, he has the extra year of eligibility not because of COVID, but also in the fact that Cornell actually didn't play football the 1 year that he was there. He transferred over from Cornell. He was an all-conference tackle there, so he's versatile. So Penn State could line him up at tackle if they wanted to, even though they moved him to guard, possibly even center, depending on what Juice Scruggs does. But I'll get to that in just a second here. Cornell actually canceled its entire season in the Ivy League, so he didn't play any football games, so he still has that extra eligibility. This is a major impact because of what Penn State has coming in and what they also have returning. You technically could have the whole offensive line come back in 2023. Olu Fashanu, even though he's being talked about as a top 10 pick, even a top 5 in the 2023 NFL draft, he could actually come back. And I've just heard some rumors that he wants to finish out his degree. He would like to stay another year at Penn State before he does move on to the NFL. But it is hard for me to see a guy like him of his caliber pass up the chance at a top 10 or even a top 5. A first round pick is when you usually go. If you're going to be selected in the first round, you go to the draft. Even if you could improve your stock, if you will, right? So for Olu Fashanu, he technically could return. Juice Scruggs could also technically still return. Even though he is a redshirt senior, he's got the extra COVID year, and he could come back and start at center. Olu Fashanu would still start at left tackle. So this would create a problem here. You'd have a lot of roadblocks, but I think having too many offensive linemen as opposed to having too little is a good thing for Penn State, especially since they've struggled with O-linemen during James Franklin's tenure. But hypothetically, yes, the whole offensive line could return next year, and that includes Caedan Wallace as well. But my predicted 2023 offensive line, I think Juice Scruggs does move on. I think he goes to the NFL draft. I also think that Olu Fashanu won't pass up a top 10 spot if that's what draft scouts are telling him. So my expected offensive line for next year would be Hunter Nourzad moves over to center because they'll have Drew Shelton at left tackle. We saw him play against Indiana. Landon Tengwall, we'll get to his status in just a moment. Not so good news about him. But Landon Tengwall would come back and be the starting left guard, hypothetically. You would have Nourzad at center. Then at right guard, Sal Wormley. And at right tackle, Caedan Wallace. That is a bulk of this year's offensive line anyway. So you're not going to miss a beat. Plus, you have 3 top offensive line recruits that are coming in and can be quality backups if needed. Javen Williams, who's one of the best in the country. So is Alex Birchmeyer. Those 2 respectively out of Pennsylvania and Virginia. They're expected to sign with Penn State. And Anthony Donko out of Virginia as well, another one that will be a starter at some point in time during his Penn State career. And Phil Trautwein deserves a ton of credit. The offensive line coach. I remember not too long ago when everyone was calling for him to be fired. How about that now? Yeah. Just give some people some time. Phil Trautwein is now getting applauded for what he's able to do technically because so many of these players come in raw. They're just raw talent. They have good strength. They have good mobility. They're smart, but they're not technically sound when they're coming into the Penn State program. And Phil Trautwein is able to set them up because there are a lot of technical aspects of being an offensive lineman that can make or break you on the line of scrimmage. So he deserves a ton of credit. This was Hunter Nourzad, and what his explanation in a quote, he said, just looking at everything, I just really wanted to come back. I didn't want to have any regrets. And I think college football is super fun. Penn State's one of the best places to play at. We have the best fan base. Our coaches are great. Everybody is great. The decision was easy, to be honest with you. There you have it. Hunter Nourzad is a Happy Valley fan and wants to stay an extra year. And then this is from James Franklin. He said this yesterday in his weekly press conference. He just came walking in to his office and had a couple questions for me. And at the end of our conversation, he said, I'm staying. So Franklin didn't have to really do all that much recruiting to keep one of his better offensive linemen. I also know this about Hunter Nourzad. Went to Cornell, so as you can imagine, now goes to Penn State. You can imagine that he's pretty intelligent and academically sound. I've heard that he is pursuing his master's and that this is a 2-year program. So this makes entire sense for Hunter Nourzad to come back. He has the extra year of eligibility. He loves Penn State football. And then on top of that, he's going to complete his 2-year master's program at Penn State. So this is just a huge win all across the board and everyone succeeds. Now, with the good news comes a little bit of bad news. For those who were wondering, and James Franklin finally revealed it yesterday in his press conference, that Landon Tengwall, who started at left guard actually over Hunter Nourzad, even though they were listed as co-starters, Hunter Nourzad was the second guy to go in after Landon Tengwall. But Tengwall is out for the season. He had season-ending surgery that James Franklin shared with the media. We don't know what it is. I can't speculate because I don't have the slightest clue. Normally, leg injuries are pretty common, but it could be anything. I don't want to assume. If you know anything, feel free to give us a tip here on Locked On Nittany Lions. But what is so strange to me is that they said that this injury occurred during warmups versus Michigan, and then we never heard about Landon Tengwall again. So I don't know what you were doing in warmups that I can't imagine that he fully injured himself in a warmup before a football game, if that makes sense. I think that there was probably something that he re-aggravated going into that game against Michigan, which is a shame. That's not how you want to end your season. You don't want to get injured, period. But here we are. And Landon Tengwall, I think he'll be back. I think he'll be stronger to go along with all that depth that I talked about here. And I did name him in the starting group projected for next season. Caedan Wallace is also expected to be back pretty soon. He suffered an injury against Minnesota, and you had to have Bryce Effner kick back out to right tackle. And Sal Wormley's been banged up. If I'm being honest, I thought Sal Wormley got benched. I thought he got benched against Minnesota, which is crazy because talking to a former player like Aeneas Hawkins, who tells me that Sal Wormley is one of the best offensive linemen. The second he stepped on campus, we all knew it. We knew that he was going to be a starter right away. And I said, man, he's getting benched. No, he was getting a breather. He was getting some rest for Bryce Effner. And then with Caedan Wallace going down, you had to kick Effner back out to right tackle and then bring a banged up Sal Wormley. And that's just how tough he is. That's a testament to his toughness and how physical he is to push through it, despite being banged up. He's not injured, but he's not 100% from what James Franklin has shared with us. And Olu Fashanu, who did leave the final series against Ohio State and missed all of Indiana, is expected to be back, but he is week to week. So it's not a season-ending injury, but it's something they're going to have to monitor. And I don't think we're going to see him against Maryland. But Drew Shelton held down the fort. He didn't have the best Pro Football Focus grade, but that's fine. True freshman came in a big setting, a Big Ten matchup on the road, and performed admirably well. So I think we'll see Drew Shelton again against Maryland this upcoming Saturday. And he'll get some help, but I think he'll be able to get the job done. And it is a tougher Maryland pass rush front four with some quality talent there as opposed to what Indiana had to offer. So bigger test for the true freshman. My name is Zach Seyko, and this is Locked On Nittany Lions. So that's some of the good news. There was also other good news for Penn State yesterday, and it came in the form of the college football playoff ranking. Where the Nittany Lions stand is coming up after this. Today's episode of Locked On Nittany Lions is sponsored by Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with security, but you've been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Nittany Lions listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Simply Safe was named the best home security system of 2022 by US and World Report, a third year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Zach Seyko. Thanks for listening or watching. We are now on YouTube. You can subscribe to the channel, watch the show. If you do so, please leave comments, feedbacks, anywhere that you are able to under your podcast or on YouTube. The comment section is open for you for questions, comments, and to compliment the Nittany Lions or drag them if they don't do so well. The college football playoff ranking came out yesterday, the new top 25. Penn State does, in fact, move up one spot to number 14. I thought that was fair with some of the teams that had lost and the way those teams had lost, plus the way Penn State won. Okay, you go on the road after you lose to a tough Ohio State team, and the way you bounce back with the limited troops that you have, I think that warrants moving them up just a spot. And personally, I think they could beat other teams ahead of them, like an Ole Miss, for example, or a UCLA that are ranked higher than them, a Utah even just one spot above them. But that's besides the point. The new top 4 are Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU. And I know this is Locked On Nittany Lions, but by golly, TCU deserves some respect. They are 7-point underdogs to Texas this weekend, but they have beaten some tough ranked opponents in the Big 12 up to 4 now, and they're finally in the college football playoff. They're still perfect, so I hope they beat Texas so that my analysis looks pretty good. But the Horned Frogs, I think, deserve a spot in the college football playoff at this point. If they lose at any point in time, then, of course, that conversation changes. But they've had it's not like Michigan, where you have just the win over Penn State and you've beaten the toughest opponents in the FBS, like a Colorado State and a Hawaii, to open up the season. No, TCU has gone through the gauntlet of its own, beating 4 ranked Big 12 opponents. For Penn State, though, only 2 losses to those 2 top 4 teams. They're both in the college football playoff right now as we speak, and that is number 2 Ohio State and number 3 Michigan. So Penn State, this is a team that is going to finish 10-2. This is a team that can finish in the top 10 when all said and done, and the college football playoff committee does rank them there. Those 2 losses, it's not like they were upset or they were surprised or, man, that was a game they really should have won, but they didn't. They were underdogs in both those Michigan and Ohio State games. And sometimes, you just kind of have to accept that Penn State is unfortunately not a college football playoff contender this year, and they lost to them as such. But with the expectations that most of the media, the fans gave them, the 7-5, possibly even 6-6, 8-4 at best, they're going to be 10-2, and they're going to be given a bowl by the selection committee. So what bowl do we all think they will go to? Well, I like them in, now this is what Brett McMurphy of Action Network says, and this is a pretty neat one. The Orange Bowl down in Miami, Florida against North Carolina, the Tar Heels. So they're assuming that the Tar Heels will win the ACC and be one of the better teams. And that's with whatever Ohio State and Michigan do. One of them is going to get in the college football playoff. I can't imagine that both of them would miss, especially that one will knock out the other. Whichever that is, that'll be up to the last week of the regular season. But Brett McMurphy says Orange Bowl against North Carolina. That is, for me, that would be an exciting matchup. This could happen, and it's all more likely to happen because Penn State hasn't been there since 2005 when they beat Florida State with the walk-off field goal. And, I mean, Penn State and North Carolina, there's going to be a lot of points scored. So it's an exciting matchup that I think the bowl committee would want. And let me remind you of how this works. So bowls aren't set up based on, who's the best matchup and who can challenge each other and who brings out the strengths and weaknesses of each opponent. No. That's not how the committees think. Okay. Aside from the college football playoff, they think that way. But when it comes to the individual bowls and what they ultimately decide, they say, well, how many dollars can we get? How many viewers can we get? How many tickets can we sell? And this matchup would sell tickets. It's not a repeat. There's a uniqueness to it because you don't normally see Penn State versus North Carolina. You don't really see Penn State versus any ACC opponent because I think Clemson would be a fair matchup as well. Clemson is number 10 right now in the college football playoff rankings. So it is a Big 12 versus ACC matchup or Notre Dame versus Big 10 matchup. Based on the way that the bowls are set up. They have their designated conferences, and you can see that online, actually. So I'm not predicting this bowl based on a shot in the dark. This is legitimately the bowl committees have a conference that they can pick from, and then they go from there. So it would be a Big 10 versus ACC team, and it makes sense if Penn State and North Carolina or Clemson are ranked near each other. They're going to take one of those 2 teams to face Penn State if that's the case. Someone suggested to me Penn State versus Alabama. And while I like the idea of it, I think that Alabama would actually beat them pretty handedly. I don't want to say that. I hate to admit it, but I think that Alabama would have no problems beating Penn State. But that's just my opinion. Maybe that could change. Hopefully there are a lot of bowl opt-outs for Alabama. I think there will be some for Penn State as well, but maybe some more for Alabama. That would be a big help. The Rose Bowl is also in play, too. If you like the game out in Pasadena, California, they could ultimately play a USC or a UCLA. Both of those teams are in the top 10 as well. Well, UCLA is top 12. They are number 12, and USC is number 8, actually. There is a possibility that Ohio State and Michigan make the college football playoff. Now, for this to happen, I would think that Michigan would actually have to beat Ohio State because Ohio State has a better resume. They beat Penn State on the road. They beat Notre Dame. They played tougher competition, whereas Michigan just has Penn State. And I don't know if the committee is going to accept that unless Michigan is able to beat Ohio State on the road, whereas I think Ohio State could still sneak in potentially as a 4, but a lot of things would need to happen. But it is, even though the chances are small, the chances are still there that Ohio State and Michigan are in the college football playoff, and then Penn State in fact, goes to the Rose Bowl as that next best Big Ten team, and then they play whatever Pac-12 team. And Utah could be even factored in there. Utah is ranked one spot ahead of Penn State, so there's that. In my final segment, we're going to visit Penn State men's basketball again. They're fresh off of that win against Winthrop, 93-68. They got Loyola of Maryland tomorrow in the Bryce Jordan Center, but today is actually National Signing Day for the class of 2023. Where does Penn State stand? Who are they bringing in? That is all next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Can we pause the pod for a second? Okay, we're paused. Great, because you got to try this. I'm talking about Built Bar's new reimagined flavors. Cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, coconut brownie topper, white chocolate peppermint granola. It's Built's take on the granola bar, so it's more filling and still insanely tasty. And candy cane brownie puff. Built Puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud. First off, for anyone who hasn't tried Built bars before, they're literally the best tasting protein bars ever built. They're revolutionizing nutrition as we know it with a 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, and shockingly low sugar and calories. Just 130 calories. Just sink your teeth into the first bite and it'll change your life forever. I'm not kidding. There will be a time before you tried these new Built flavors. I'm not kidding. There will be a time before you tried these new Built flavors. And the magical, wonderful time afterwards, you'll probably be wondering which new flavor's my favorite. An unanswerable question, to say the least. They're unbelievable, and they're all different, so you can order a mix box and try all 5 flavors for yourself. Built. You got to try this. Get 15% off your order right now. That's right, 15% off by using the code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. Welcome back to Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko. Thanks for joining me on this episode. Remember, you can leave any feedback in the YouTube comments. If you want to watch the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel Locked On Nittany Lions and hit the bell so you don't miss new episodes. As always, wherever you get your podcasts. We've talked plenty about Penn State football. How about back to the men's basketball team coming off that win against Winthrop, and they got a game against Loyola, Maryland tomorrow in the Bryce Jordan Center, tip-off at 7. But they still got to build for the future, and that begins today with the Class of 2023 National Signing Day. First, before we get to the Nittany Lions, Duke and Kentucky are they're crazy good when it comes to recruiting. Duke has somehow still found some success behind John Shire. They might even be better with John Shire in terms of recruiting. I won't go that far because Mike Krzyzewski was one of the greatest basketball coaches, period, ever. I didn't want to see him retire, but all great things come to an end. And John Calipari at Kentucky, Kentucky's been a little bit down when it's come to recruiting, but they're back up there. Duke has 5 5-star commits, if you can believe that. All these guys are in the top 20. Same with Kentucky. Now they only have 3. It's not as great as 5, but they have 3 5-star commits, also all in the top 20. But good for Ben. Those are the 1 and 2 teams. Michigan State actually comes in at number 3 in the overall team rankings that are going to sign today. But Penn State is currently number 24 according to 24/7 Sports, which is very respectable. It's not as good as the 2022 class, who is here, and that has Evan Mahaffey, Kanye Clary, Jameel Brown, Keba Jai, just to name those guys. But they're going to get 3 commits to sign today. And those 3 individuals are, the first one, Kerry Booth. That is 6'9" forward, Kerry Booth. And this guy might sound a little familiar because if you love Penn State basketball, it's because you saw his dad play. Calvin Booth played at Penn State, a Penn State legend. That is his son. Kerry Booth is the son of Calvin Booth, who is a former Penn State basketball legend and now the current Denver Nuggets general manager. So basketball runs in the family. And I think we'll see a lot of similarities in gameplay. And if you like this, Calvin Booth was very good at blocking shots, was also a former Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. So hopefully Kerry Booth can bring that to this team. Currently, I'll give credit again to 24/7 Sports. They have him ranked as a 4-star commit with a 96 overall rating. So he's one of the best in the country. He is in the top 100, and he's coming from the state of New Hampshire. Also in this class, it is 6'4" guard Logan Imes. 24/7 Sports has him listed as a 3-star and an 89 overall commit. So the 3 and the 4-star, there's really not that much of a difference here. That's why I like to include the overall rating because you're kind of just splitting hairs at that point. But 89 overall, and that's good for getting a guy who's just a natural scorer. And that's something else that this final player has in common, and you might recognize him as well, because that is the son of Penn State men's basketball head coach Micah Shrewsberry, and it is Braden. Braden Shrewsberry is coming in. He currently goes to the local high school, State College, which is just minutes away from Penn State. And like, as I mentioned, he is his son. So he's going to be signing. I like what Jameel Brown said. I remember this back on Twitter when it happened, when Braden Shrewsberry shared that he had an offer from Penn State. And Jameel Brown said, "Where did this conversation happen? The dinner table?" So it was very funny. And it's already good to see future teammates having fun with one another and joking around. So those are the 3 commits you need to know about: Kerry Booth, Logan Imes, and Braden Shrewsberry. All of them are natural scorers. Kerry Booth, a little bit better, more polished defender, but all that will come in time. I've liked what I've seen from Logan and Braden. They just got a natural instinct for finding the basket. Kerry Booth able to use his size to his advantage at 6'9", and that comes in very handy, like his father, blocking some shots. So all these guys should contribute right away. I think that Logan and Braden are a little more of developmental prospects as opposed to Kerry, who should plug and play right away, especially because Penn State does need help in the front court. We'll see if Micah Shrewsberry goes back to the transfer portal in the offseason. I know that's way thinking down the road, but this year's group, loaded backcourt. A lot of guys that will return next season. If we're already looking that far ahead, why not? But the front court always needs a boost because the Big Ten likes to play a lot of big guys. See Purdue, see Michigan. They're not going to go away. So Penn State does need some size. And that's why I think Kerry Booth could see a lot of playing time as a freshman next year. I know it's far away, but National Signing Day is today. So the future is today, and you have to think about it. You got to talk about it. And this is a good class. Number 24 in the country, Micah Shrewsberry bringing in back-to-back solid groups for the program. That's going to do it for me. We're going to start to preview the Maryland Terrapins in the next 2 episodes here. This is essentially a rivalry for Penn State, just given the ties of James Franklin to the University of Maryland program. When he was a coach there, he was the head coach in waiting, and they didn't seem the need to hire him. And he went to Vanderbilt, and the rest is history. But all those players that come from the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, the DMV, like, this is personal for a lot of players on both sides. And there's plenty of players on Maryland's team that were recruited by Penn State. So it's going to be important for them. It's going to be personal for them. So let's break it down all over the next 2 days, tomorrow and Friday. Nittany Lions and Terrapins. I'm excited. This is the biggest matchup that Penn State has left before the bowl game, and we're going to treat it as such here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.